Okay, cool. Yeah, so today I wanted to, I guess, talk a bit longer at the start. And yeah, it's just a really big topic, basically. And um, yeah, I feel like there's kind of a few different sections that I want to go through and just give like a bit of an overview of um, this concept of like connecting wholeheartedly with all experience and using the jhanas as a tool to do that. And yeah, hopefully it will just give a nice kind of overview and an intro. And almost like each of the sections, I could talk about them for like an hour each. So if there's anything afterwards where it's like, oh, that was really interesting, I'd like to know more about that, tell me and I can do a session in more depth on like a specific bit. But yeah, for this, I just wanted to kind of paint the whole picture, I suppose. And yeah, the main kind of gist of it is talking about how it's through processing difficult emotions and resistances that is really at the core of awakening. So through kind of like being with our pain or our challenges and kind of coming up against things that we find difficult in some way or another, that's how we can open up to kind of new ways of being and sometimes quite radically different ways of being. And part of this, I'm going to talk a little bit about my path and my experiences, and like what that's opened up for me, and also talking about how this can be done in a kind of more manageable, like less overwhelming practice, and what the benefits of it are for approaching it in this way. Because yeah, one of the really important things about this is that through facing our difficulties and our pain, the point of it is very important that the ethos of it is not about punishing ourselves. It's not about this sort of like drudgery or it being difficult because it should be or we deserve it, or and like it's not that at all. It's about growth. So it's about like vulnerability, being real, and when we open in this way, it creates an upward cycle where we can experience that, like being bringing some courage, being courageous, making time to experience difficulties. That will then create more spaciousness in experience. It will make our experience more pleasurable in the long run, and it's for the benefit of us and all beings. So yeah, it's kind of like a joyful sort of willingness to walk through the storm and like go through difficulty for because it's good for us. Yeah, so that's really important that sort of like ethos is there. And yeah, ultimately this type of practice can lead to a really deep sense of trust in ourselves, in our experience. It can create a real like sense of home in our body and create a place where we're like we feel resilient, supported, we feel clear in experience, and we can kind of tune into our body to help us as like a source of guidance in a way. We can kind of listen to our body, and that it can tell us about like well-being, like what we need to be well and to be happy. It can be a resource of like wisdom of how we interact with people, being able to support others as well as ourselves. So that's kind of the outcome of this type of practice. So yeah, I guess starting with this, just a little bit more about how this kind of radical, like open-hearted connection is really like the home of awakening for me, because when I talk about the heart, it's like the part of us that connects. It's the part of us that connects with experience, whether that's like directly feeling physical sensations, whether that's like seeing something. That's all of experience is your being connecting with another part of the universe. And the heart is the part of us that is this sense of connection. So it's really, for me, it's like the home of awakening. And when we're meditating with the heart, there's kind of two ways we can do it. One is that we can just have a nice holiday, so we can kind of like really like connect with each other and find a nice, pleasant, heartful experience. And that's sometimes very needed and very nice. And then the other way is that it can be a transformation. And so today I'm talking more about this like transformative aspect of the heart and connection. And almost like connecting with new parts of ourselves and being willing to change. And even if that process of changing and growth can be quite difficult, it's like going through that. And the element that is associated with the heart is fire, and I think that kind of those two aspects of it is nicely the kind of holiday or the transformation is nicely shown by fire, because there's a sense of like fire being a place where we can all go and sit around the campfire together and have a nice time, or there's this more sort of like powerful transformative effect of fire. And so today we're kind of stoking the fire and watching some transformation happen within us, hopefully. And I think part of this kind of fire aspect is that this transformative aspect is that it's like understanding that we can have these sort of awakening experiences during meditation where we almost like glimpse a different way of being. It's like we have a moment of just like, everything changes. But if we really want to make lasting changes to how we experience the world and how we experience ourselves, that transformation has to sort of reach into these difficult aspects of ourselves and our lives. And it's like we can't expect to just like meditate a bunch, have a sort of transformative moment, and then for everything to have changed, it has to reach into like the realness of how we feel, the realness of who we are, the realness of like our bodies. And for me, a lot of this is kind of held in making sure that there's a balance between the kind of the sort of yang energy of this like masculine kind of light, things that we perceive and things that we see, and the way, which is a lot of that sort of mental meditation and kind of like perceiving things differently. And then it's balanced with the yin, like feminine dark energy, which is more this sort of like how things are felt, how things are in the body. And it's almost like if we want change to be lasting, it has to be really rooted into the darkness and the body. So it's like, it's almost like if you imagine, the kind of light in the air, it's like we can meditate and things can change and shift quite quickly. The wind can just pass through. But in the same way that something can change quite quickly in a nice way, it can also just, as soon as we're back in our lives, it can just float off again. Whereas if we're really working in the body and like bringing that along with, it's more well rooted. And if we make the changes there, then the effects are longer lasting. So this is why I'm going to use Jhana meditation for this meditation, because the jhanas, it's like an open alignment between all the parts of our being. So it's like our body, our heart, our mind, the soul, they all kind of come into alignment in this way, in this really nice, sort of pleasant way. And it's like the whole of our being is involved. And so, when we're working with that in meditation, it's like everything's connected, nothing's excluded. So it has that sort of radical, wholehearted connection to all parts of us and all parts of experience. And let's maybe talk a bit. I'll maybe talk a bit more about that, the jhanic aspect of it. So there's obviously there's like the 8 jhanas, and they're kind of like these very refined ways of being. So when we're practicing, it's like getting all those parts of us into alignment and them being open, and then you get the very sort of refined, the different jhanas are kind of different versions of like very refined ways of being. And that's really helpful in practice, because it's like if you're aiming for this very refined experience, you can notice like all the little things that aren't refined and kind of work through them and work with them and incorporate them. And it's really good for, I guess, like getting very clear on what you need to do and developing very specific sort of skills around it. But when there was a concept that Joost has come up with, which I absolutely love, is basically just like detaching the concept of jhanas from the concept of them needing to be those 8 things. So rather than just having like the 4 form jhanas and the 4 formless jhanas, if we just take the concept of jhana, so this sense of being like concentrated, being present, being aligned in the body, the heart, the mind and the soul, in this way where energy is present and we feel very, very sort of present and open. We just like take that concept and free it up and just say, okay, so what if we can have the jhana of anything? So you can have the jhana of sadness or the jhana of you. So like for me, it would be like the jhana of Rosa. Like, what does that feel like? And so really grateful to Joost for this, because it's essentially, just like frees up this way of seeing it and approaching it, and creates a way to like be wholehearted, to be open-hearted with any type of experience. It doesn't have to be like this very serious, very specific, very refined kind of classic way of practicing. It can be more just like joyful and expressive, and in that way it can reach, in that way it's a deeper practice because it can reach more parts of us. Like I say, you can have the jhana of sadness or the jhana of anger, for example. Like, what does that really feel like to embrace that in a really kind of like joyful, wholehearted, connected way for the benefit of us and all beings. A kind of like clean version of these parts of us that can often be in shadow or be shut down in some way. And so one thing I kind of wanted to talk about with this is that I often talk about the need that we're sort of learning the capacity to love wholeheartedly, or to learning the capacity to cultivate compassion, for example. And I think what someone's pointed out to me, which I think is really important and is very true, is that it's like we naturally, the capacity to love and the capacity to kind of meet experience with compassion, with joy, that's already like built into our hearts. Like we don't need to, it's not the love that we need to cultivate. We're already like a well of that. That's very much present in us. It's just that gets like covered over with a bunch of crap in our heads because we have to learn to survive in the world, and people are mean to us, and our parents were imperfect and all of these things. So that's like covered up with a bunch of fear in the sort of like mind upwards realm. And then in the body, it's like we're kind of like we've had to hold ourselves together, and like maybe had some serious traumas in the body, or maybe just like the trauma of being a human being that's alive, that's had to function, that's been told like, oh, don't cry, that makes you a worse, or whatever, wasn't safe when they were younger, whatever it is. It's like all of that is stored in our body, and so it's almost like from those two directions, it's like the love gets shut down. It doesn't have any space for it to move, because there's all this sort of conceptual like fear and anxiety stopping it from the top, and then from the bottom there's just like a bunch of shut down resistance, because we've had to keep ourselves safe. And so when we're cultivating the capacity, what I mean with that is we're removing the layers of fear and resistance and judgment, self-judgment, criticism, cynicism, all of that sort of stuff. We're just like peeling that back in a way that is healthy and safe and reassuring to us. And then we're also like working into the body and just like releasing emotions, allowing our bodies to be more natural, just making more spaciousness. And it's like as we do those two things, then love just sort of naturally kind of flows into those parts and takes the space. So an example of this is like sadness. One of the things about life is that everyone's carrying sadness and grief, and it's almost like we haven't had the capacity as a human race to like hold all the grief that's here. It's just too sad. And so if you aren't able to feel it, it's like you're caged by it because you're holding on to it in your body. But if you can find some space, like with a sad music playlist, to just like have a cry and let it out, it's like you're not holding that anymore, and there's more of a free flow in that part of your body, and the love can kind of touch on that part and reach it, and it's within yourself, but it's also within others. So when someone's sad around you, if it's shut down in you, you'll struggle to meet it. But if it's like open in you, then there's space for to like hold it and meet it and like be touched by it emotionally between you. And that's really like, with this idea of it being for the benefit of yourself and other beings, it's not necessarily that it can sort of change content in a way. It changes your relationship to content, so there can be wildly less suffering, but it doesn't sort of remove the suffering, in the sense like it doesn't remove difficult content. It can just change your relationship, so that rather than difficult content being something that is like a complete no-go, or that is a reason to judge yourself or judge other people, it becomes, that difficult content can become like an opportunity to connect. And it can still be painful, but it's a way in which it's just like what's there, it's just part of what's in life. And having a healthy relationship with it allows us to be real about that, and to support each other and connect with each other, and just like be in it together. Yes. So let's see. So one quick thing I wanted to talk about with this, and you don't have to remember all this for the guided meditation. It's just a bit of a like journey, I suppose, story almost. But I wanted to talk about like concentration and what that means. Because I think we've been told the word concentration, to me, before I started meditating, and even now, has some connotations of being told to concentrate at school. And I think if you're an intelligent person, it's like often the thing you're being told off for, or told to concentrate on, is really boring. It's like too easy or too boring or something. And so like concentration to me was like this thing where you had to like sit and read a thing, and just, it's just sort of like this dull mind thing that you're doing. And actually this meditative practice is not that. It's so it is the capacity to like focus on something, but it's also equally the capacity, is equally the other types of concentration. So concentration as the opposite of dilution. So kind of like a relative amount of stuff that you have. So like fully concentrated rather than diluted with water, for example. And with the jhanas and concentration meditation, it's like through focusing on one part of experience, it's like you're allowing that part to flood your being and fill your being. So rather than being this sort of like scattered experience where we're a bit all over the place and there's lots of stuff going on, and there's a bunch of thoughts and feelings, and it's all like diluted and scattered, it's like this very concentrated, kind of gathered experience where we're sort of flooded with this one aspect. And part of being able to do this and to concentrate is that we have to first recognize the parts that are not this thing that we're concentrating on in a way. There's almost like a twofold part of it. One is a sort of determination to just like push through and really like just focus on the thing that you want to focus on, and like almost kind of shut out the things that aren't that. There's an element of like focus and like willingness to just go there. And then the other aspect which you need in balance is almost kind of like, when you do that, if there's something that's really strong and is still trying to like take you away from this thing that you're focusing on, it's like making some space for that thing. It's understanding that that has something important in it for you. So for example, if you're really focusing on like contentment, or you're allowing contentment to be the thing that is like filling experience in a concentrated way, if there's something coming up that's causing huge amounts of discontent, it's like that thing, it's like first allowing the resistances some space and saying, okay, what's there? Like, what needs to be seen? What needs some attention? What wants to be felt in the body? What needs space in order to sort of clear it out of the way to then have the contentment? It's like there's some piece of junk in there that needs clearing out before you can be with what you want to be with. And yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about my story, and I think I'll be very, very quick with this. But essentially, it's that process of connecting with the parts that we resist and like either clearing them out or making space for them in experience that is the sort of awakening process. And basically in my meditation practice, I kind of put this on super speed power, because almost like all of my practice was focusing on the jhana of suffering. It was like, where's the deepest suffering? How can I concentrate on that? What are the resistances to it that need to be felt first? And then what needs to be felt in the suffering? And it's almost like that just it was like an exponential effect. So yeah, if we're meditating and we find some resistances and then we clear them out and then we're able to be in a pleasant experience, that will like slowly awaken us, because we'll be like slowly dealing with these different resistances. But this was like superpower of that. And it's basically just the quickest way to do it, and it's dangerous. Right, as you know, I got into some trouble doing it, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But the place where it's left me is a place where I'm basically always in jhana. So I guess it's just like a bit of kind of inspiration and proof of concepts that this idea of like going to our worst places, going to the deepest pain, like going to the parts of us that really society would really not approve of. Like when we're in a meditative setting, if you can really go there and really experience it and open yourself to it wholeheartedly, it's like you come out the other side. The love will carry you through. If you're doing it in an open-hearted way, you will move through the suffering and come out the other side. And when you do, there'll be more space for love, more space for connection, more space for pleasure, more pleasant sensations in a wider context of experience. So it's really just like hopefully like a bit of inspiration that that going to these places is worth doing, and it works. And interesting, and then an interesting kind of counterpoint to that as well is that also, so another jhana that I spent a lot of time in and doing a lot of work with is the jhana of romantic love and kind of fantasy and like pleasure. And there's a lot of sort of there is kind of a lot of theory around that with like integrating your anima or animus. So for me, like integrating the masculine sides of my being that were maybe in shadow or unreachable, like through romantic fantasy and things like that. But there's also just the like pleasure. It brings a very like pleasurable, very beautiful, very connected. I always think it's like one of the deepest parts of our being, this part that wants to connect with romantic love. So I've thought that was worth saying as well, that it can be this, while I talk a lot about like suffering and meeting suffering, we can also have a lot of resistances to really pleasant parts of our experience. It's almost like fear of the intimacy, or things like not deserving, not thinking that we don't deserve things, or like keeping ourselves small. Things like that can also be resistances to really pleasant experiences. So yeah, really worth opening to like the darkest, most difficult parts of our being, with no judgment, and also the most like just beautiful and fascinating and like compelling parts of our being and experience. Let's see. Yeah, and I think a nice thing about this as well, this type of practice, is that it is hard work. So it's worth saying that it can be really hard work to meet these resistances. But it's also like cumulative. So because we're making these changes and they're like grounded in the body, they will change how we carry ourselves. It changes like the cells of our bodies, the like structure of our energy bodies. And so it's almost like as you go through your it's almost like you're changing the way of being, so it like builds up through life, and it pays off in the long run. So sometimes it can get worse before it gets better. It often does, but there's a sort of long run sense of like changing how you are in the world in this like lasting way that's good for you and others. And then so the sort of final thing that I wanted to talk about before we go more into the meditation is that one of the things that this gives you, this sort of practice of being really connecting with experience, kind of like open-heartedly, and developing this sort of capacity for jhana, is that we're more in touch with our body. And so rather than being in this like conceptual world, there's more of a like intuitive and felt sense of what the world is, and who we are. And what this can open up is it's almost like a lot of the time I'm not thinking with my mind at all. It's almost like I'm thinking with my body. So I'm listening to my body in a situation. My body's kind of just walking me around, and this can give you a really deep sense of like wisdom and guidance and connectedness. And it's a much more sort of trustworthy source of information in a way. It's like we're taught not to trust our bodies. We're taught to be very heady. And so the process of coming into the body can be a bit confusing and take work, but once you're there and once you've got a real sense of it, that sense of like what the information that you can trust in yourself becomes really clear. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about with this is paying attention to when there's something that's happening in your body, you're having a sensation in your body that feels a certain way, and then your mind is trying to tell you that it's something different to what it is. And yeah, so one of the things that is really important to me about this and that I talk about is that there's certain teachers, certain Dharma teachers, who will bring out this dynamic in people. And it's not just Dharma teachers, it happens in the world all the time as well. But it's essentially when people are like playing kind of power games or trying to like get something out of you, or they're trying to like strategize and win, they're playing mind games. It's like this manifests in a way where your body's getting one message from them and your mind's getting another. And what happens is this causes like an internal conflict in you where your body and mind can't connect with each other anymore because they're getting different messages. And you essentially have to choose which one to pick. And because we live in a very heady mental sort of society, generally the mind will win. So it'll just like shut the body down. And the reason why this is so important to me when it comes to meditation and Dharma teachers is because that is then achieving like the opposite of what we're trying to do here. So what we're trying to do here is like really feel into our own experience, connect with it, understand our own experience, trust it, learn about different parts of it. And it's about each of us feeling into like what is our own truth, what is our own experience. And when it becomes this sort of like conceptual mind game of like who can be the cleverest or who can be the person who's getting the most like respect or whatever it is, then that it creates this conflict between body and mind in people. And so with this, I really basically just recommend to people that if with all like teachers, all yoga teachers, meditation teachers, Dharma teachers, anyone who you're kind of putting your trust into to like guide you in this way or to listen to their content about experience, is just spend a bit of time like listening to them or watching a video of them ideally, and pay attention to how your body feels when you're listening. And then like notice how your mind, what your mind thinks, and just notice if there's a conflict. If your body is telling you one thing and your mind is telling you another, that's just like, for me, such a big red flag of this isn't healthy. Whereas if something feels good, if you're listening to someone and you're like relaxed in your body, and or at least you can, your mind and your body are kind of saying the same things, singing from the same hymn sheet, then that's a really good sign. So I would say learn to trust the signals from the body. So that's kind of just like an overview of some different things. And like I say, you don't have to hold on to any of this information for this meditation. You can just, trust that your body has the information that it needs. It has the wisdom. And so we're going to go into the move into the meditation section a bit more. And I think I just, want to talk a little bit more about that sense of trust. Creating trust in your experience and your body, because that the capacity to connect open-heartedly and really be present here, it takes a degree of vulnerability. It's like we're allowing things to touch us, kind of physically we're feeling the sensations, like emotionally we're being touched, energetically there's stuff kind of moving around between people, between us and the world. Intellectually we're letting things into our minds, and being open to it is this experience of allowing these things to touch us. And that's really it's really raw and it's very intimate, and that can be very scary. So there's a sense of like having that trust in your body and really developing that and feeling into that in a way where you're not trying to override that and kind of force yourself into a state of just like openness, but you're also not just like shutting down and not trusting. It's like feeling into what does trust mean for you, like what would help you be a bit more trusting of experience. Where does trust mean that you need to stop being so open? Like it's kind of it's almost like learning to trust your body and understanding the limits, understanding the parts where you can open your comfort zone a bit wider. And it's almost like, approaching that as an experiment. So being open-minded about it, being experimental about it, and playing with that edge of like keeping yourself safe and also pushing your boundaries a little bit. So yes, I would finally say that if difficult stuff comes up, it's really helpful to feel as if the difficulty is purposeful. So feel the emotions like, there's a reason they're there. They're part of your history. They're part of who you are. And maybe they are difficult and that's hard, but it's also kind of part of your story, and feeling them and embracing them can give you, going through difficult stuff can give you a real depth of character, and having that sense of purposefulness and meaningfulness around them is helpful, and it can help lift shame as well. So we don't need to feel ashamed of anything that comes up in these meditations. All the darkness, all the weirdness, all the emotional vulnerability is very welcome here. There's no shame. And it doesn't need to say anything like anything about you either. This is just this almost like a cosmic experiment that we're doing, where we're feeling into like what is present in experience in this corner of the cosmos that is us sitting together. So with that in mind, remembering to trust your body, I think we will go into the meditation. And with the concentration as well, I think one thing to share about it is that, so like I said, this was my practice. The jhana of suffering was my practice. And with concentration, it's like that bit at the start where we have to be quite determined and focused. It's almost like, I think having a really short amount of time where we're really focused is much more powerful than just sitting for long amounts of time. And we're like, oh, I'll be a bit focused for a while and then that's like, there are other practices that long sits can be good for, but with concentration meditation, my advice is, if it helps you be more dedicated to the practice, to have it shorter, then do it shorter. So what I mean by this is, like, it's better to sit for 10 minutes and be really concentrated than an hour and be less concentrated. And the practice that I always used to do to get concentrated was count breaths. So either just keep counting breaths and then see how many I could count, and then go back to the start when I lost track and see how high a number I could get, or count to 10 and then start again, count to 10 and then start again. If you lose track of either the breath or the numbers, so if you're just like counting, you realise you're not paying attention to your breath anymore, or if you're just breathing, not counting, whatever, just going back, starting at one again, and like subtly not punishing ourselves or feeling bad whenever we start again, but going in with a attitude of, I'm going to try really hard to concentrate and focus on this thing. So it's that attitude of like experiment, of practice, of not having to be perfect, but equally of like really bringing ourselves, really trying hard. So that's where we're going to start. We're just going to start with counting some breaths to really like get us into hopefully a bit more concentrated state. And then from there, we're just going to go on a bit of a journey through some different jhanas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. I've come up with seven jhanas of somethings. Teaching tool courtesy of Yoast. One last thing on trusting your body is, as I talk through these different jhanas, if it brings up something else in you, so if, for example, this isn't one of them, but if I said like jhana of sadness, and then when I was talking about it, or when I said that, it brought up a load of happiness in you, go with your body. So you can listen to my words still, but trust the feeling, the sensation in your body and in your experience, and allow that to sort of blossom. Don't think that you're getting it wrong just because your experience is seems different to what I'm saying, because stuff like that can happen when people guide really like light-based meditations. I often get a lot of darkness come up. It's just one of the ways in which we work. It's like when we feel safe, all the stuff that where we felt unsafe in the past can then come up because we're in a safe space. It's kind of like this opposite reaction that we sometimes have, or whenever we're complicated beings. So the main thing is just trust your body, trust your experience, trust your emotions, allow that to blossom as we go through. Yes. So hopefully that wasn't too long of me talking. It's more than I normally talk, but like I say, it's really, I love this topic, and I would happily talk more about any of those things another time if anyone wants more. But for now, we will put all that aside and go into the meditation. So I'll give you a minute to just settle in, find a comfy position. Allow yourself to think for a minute without me blabbing. That was quite a lot of information, so maybe just seeing if there's anything that I said that feels like you need to pay attention. It's like brought something up in you that you need to pay attention to. Just give ourselves some time. If there's anything that wants to be recognised or thought or seen. And maybe now just taking a couple of deeper breaths into the belly. And almost just like consciously, as you breathe out, just letting all of that information go. Just trusting that whatever you need for this meditation you have. You don't need to hold on to anything. You can just allow yourself to be present exactly as you are. And there's no pressure with this meditation. Just an experiment into our beings, into our experience, connecting with whatever we find. And so we're going to start by counting our breaths, and we're going to count to 10 and restart and count to 10 again. And you can just breathe at whatever rate you normally breathe at. And anytime you lose track of the counting or the breaths, we just go back and start again at 1. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to count to 10 3 times. I breathe quite slowly, so. So just trusting that wherever we are, whatever state you're in, that's fine. And we're going to start from here, feeling into the jhana of fear, anxiety, and nervousness. So we want to find those parts of us and really just concentrate on those. And we're going to trust that we're all feeling into them together. We're in it together. Maybe just starting by noticing if there's any resistance to feeling those things in experience. What's stopping us? And then seeing if we can feel into it. Allowing it to be present in the body, in the heart, in the mind, and in that ineffable, metaphorical way. Just seeing if we can remember to breathe with a soft belly. Remember to allow our shoulders to not tense, or our jaws. Just seeing if we can be present in that open way, while still focusing on that fear, anxiety, or nervousness. And then just coming back to the breath. Maybe doing a couple of deeper breaths, letting that go. And the next place we're going to travel, another dark one. They're not all going to be dark, I promise. We're going to go to the jhana of anger. So again, trusting your body, trusting whatever comes up from this. Seeing what happens when I say you can connect with the jhana of anger. what comes alive, what wants to come alive in your body, in your heart, mind, the imaginal, creative part of experience. Just really focusing on that anger, allowing it to flood your being. Allowing it to feel good, to be strong. No need to hold it back. What's the energy of it? Where's the power in it? All these energy bodies sat resonating with anger. Allowing any resistances to the anger to be present. Feeling into that. Does anything want to shift or move there? Any barriers you want to smash down with your anger? Good anger. So we'll take a few breaths if it's ready. If the anger wants to continue, it can continue, but if it's ready, we can take a few breaths and let that pass. Now we're going to feel into the jhana of relaxation. So again, if the anger's still coming, if there's more anger, you can let it come. But if it's ready, if you're ready, just feeling into the jhana of relaxation. Seeing what happens when I say let the relaxation flood your being. May just be that there's a bunch of resistances there, in which case we can just meet the resistances, recognize those, work with those. There's no pressure to be relaxed, we just want to focus our being towards that direction and see what comes up. Just aligning our bodies, hearts, minds, imaginations, turning them all towards relaxation, opening in that direction and seeing what comes up. Noticing if there's any self-judgment or self-worth about whether you're allowed to relax. That can be there, but just noticing it. Noticing what relaxation feels like to you, if it does arise. And just coming back to the breath. Letting that go. And the next jhana is the jhana of you. So for me, it's like the jhana of Rosa. For you, it's the jhana of you. And just seeing what happens when you just really open your body, heart, and mind and imagination and feel it, just letting the sense of you-ness flood your being. Feeling into the resistances you may have to that. And just letting it just be so saturated with your you-ness. And if you're losing focus, you can just come back to counting breaths at any time. counting to 10 and starting again. Counting to 10, starting again. And we've just got two more jhanas that two more free-form jhanas that we're gonna visit. We'll just do a nice deep breath into the jhana of you. Breathe out, you can let that go. And the penultimate jhana is the jhana of death. The jhana of death. And this can mean whatever it means to you. So it could be grief and loss. Could be a metaphorical death of the life, birth, death cycle. It's not the right order. Could be contemplating our own death, the death of people we love. But just feeling into what happens when we open our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and that creative, imaginative part of our being. And we turn towards death in an open way. For some people there'll be lots of resistance here, and that's okay. We don't need to fight the resistance. We can just recognize and allow it. For some people this might be a relief. For me, it's quite a relaxing concept, death. And just taking some breaths in and letting the jhana of death go. moving on to our final jhana. And for this one, we're just going to go for the jhana of love. The jhana of love. And this could be a sort of universal, cosmic sort of love. This could be a friendship sort of love. Could be a deep romantic sort of love. Or it could be just a sort of almost like a joyful, a sense of joyful connection with experience. Almost just like a non-specified love. And just because it's love, it doesn't mean that it has to be happy. It can be sad. Or painful. But it can also be very beautiful and meaningful. And again, just noticing what happens when we open our bodies, hearts, minds, imaginations. We focus ourselves towards love. And allow it to saturate our being, saturate our experience. What resistances do we find? What energies do we find? What emotions do we find? What images do we find? Are there any parts where we just want to open up a little bit more? And that sense of deep trust in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, in our imaginations. Deep trust in the way that we experience the world. In the story that we've had, the story that's brought us to this moment. Just trusting that what we feel is what we feel. And allowing ourselves to slowly come out of the meditation. Maybe just trying to keep a sense of that trust in your being, trust in your experience. As you come out. No rush. Have a stretch. Take your time.